Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry for the late start, but we're ready to begin. Thank you for tuning in today to our event. Your presence and attention are highly valued and appreciated. This is Bambina Olivares in front of you today, the Director of Programming for Manila House and your host for the afternoon. Before anything else, and in line with today's topic, allow me to greet you all a belated Happy International Biodiversity Day, which officially transpired last Saturday, May 22nd. This event is very timely and fitting then as a celebration of that very important day, a celebration of the splendor of Philippine biodiversity and a celebration of the richness of the Philippines above and below water. Joining us in this program are industry experts and special guests from the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Foundation, Inc. and Malampaya Foundation, Inc., who are both here to shed light on the various efforts of their respective foundations to protect the biodiversity in key areas in Mindoro and Palawan. These foundations are primarily being supported by the Malampaya Consortium, composed of Shell Philippines Exploration, Udena Corporation, and the Philippine National Oil Company Exploration Center. In the case of Mbcfi, it has also received grants from the government and other organizations. Also joining us here are members of the academe, as well as our own Manila House members. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite non-members to reach out to us at membership@manilahouseinc.com if they're interested in pursuing membership at Manila House. Thank you all for being with us here today. We are at the turning point of history, having just crossed over to a new decade dedicated to saving the Earth and securing the future of the planet for generations to come. We cannot deny the correlation between biodiversity protection and climate change mitigation, and the discussion on global warming is something that we can no longer shy away from today. Hence, this event is very important and it concerns us all. Through this educational webinar, we aim to showcase our country's diverse and impressive terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Do you know that the Philippines is only one of 17 mega-diverse countries in the whole world? We must understand and address the urgent need to protect the fast disappearing habitats and species, both native and endemic, that are pertinent to our survival. We are grateful for the participation of the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Foundation, Inc. and Malampaya Foundation, Inc. in this webinar. For more than a decade now, these foundations have been championing the conservation efforts of our unique biodiversity in key areas of Mindoro Island, Northern Palawan, and the Verde Island Passage, with the primary goal of sustaining conservation efforts for these areas' natural treasures for future generations to come. The foundations and their partners remain steadfast in their desire to grow a larger support system to achieve this goal. These foundations are being supported by the Malampaya Consortium, composed of Shell Philippines Exploration, Udena Corporation, and the Philippine National Oil Exploration Corporation. I wouldn't be surprised if through this event emerges a new community of eco-warriors willing to fight for the preservation and protection of our unique and magnificent Philippine biodiversity. Also, just a reminder to all our viewers, to those watching the event on the Manila House Private Club YouTube channel, you may send in your questions for the Q&A segment later via the comment section of the Manila House channel, and we will try our very best to accommodate you during the panel discussion after the presentations. To those who are joining us now in the Zoom room, please kindly send your questions through the Q&A box. So now let's move on to the next part of our event, which is a presentation of the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Foundation, Incorporated. Mindoro has been tagged as the Africa of the Philippines, and the Spaniards once called it Mina de Oro, or Mine of Gold. It is the 7th largest island out of the 7,641 islands that compose the Philippine archipelago. The island is a haven of treasures featuring unique cave systems and waterfalls, pristine beaches and islands, lush forests and verdant mountains, and rich terrestrial and aquatic life. And most importantly, Mindoro Island is home to the endemic dwarf buffaloes, or tamaraws. And here's another amazing fact about Mindoro Island. I'm sure you're all familiar with Madagascar, an island known for its rich biodiversity. It is the 4th largest island in the whole world. That makes Madagascar 55.5% larger than our very own Mindoro Island. But do you know that Mindoro has more bird species than Madagascar? That's really interesting. So I would like to present to you the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Foundation, Inc., Please tune in to the audiovisual presentation that the Foundation prepared.
The Philippines is home to 7,641 islands, rich with flora and fauna. Mindoro lies across the Verde Island Passage. Verde Island Passage is recognized as the epicenter of marine biodiversity in the world, a 10-mile strait with the most diverse shore fishes on Earth, and haven of charismatic species like whale sharks, Napoleon wrasse, and sea turtles. Mindoro Island stands out as a sanctuary of biodiversity with 285 species of birds, 9 endemic species of mammals, 85 species of amphibians and reptiles, and at least 900 species of flora. Truly, Mindoro is a haven. Despite this rich biodiversity, Mindoro remains threatened by climate change. We at Mbcfi are making a promise to protect biodiversity for our children and their children. A promise to ensure that many decades from today, there will still be tamaraws grazing in the mountains of Mindoro. There will still be Malampaya flowers blooming, and Mindoro endemic flying foxes dwelling in the forests of Mindoro. Join us in making this promise a reality. Hand in hand, let us preserve and protect Mindoro's treasures for the generations to come. Together, we will build the island's legacy. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we will make it happen. Mindoro needs you.
Thank you for that video that perfectly encapsulates what the Foundation is all about. I am proud that we have foundations such as Mbcfi fighting for the preservation of our country's natural beauty and resources. I would like to introduce now our first main speaker for today, none other than the Executive Director of Mbcfi, Ms. Grace Giamante. She will provide some background information about the Foundation, as well as the results of their scientific research, their partnership with the Mangyan communities, and conservation efforts for the tamaraws. She'll also be showing us a new project at Puerto Galera, the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Center. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ms. Grace Giamante.
All right. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Grace.
Thank you very much, Bambina, for that brief introduction. Isang makakalikasang araw po sa ating lahat. Good afternoon, everyone, for tuning in, and I hope you will all stay with us until the end of the session. I promise you'll learn a lot of things in this afternoon session. But before I start with my presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Manila House for hosting this virtual discussion today. And of course, a big thank you to the Malampaya joint venture partners for making this happen. All right, let me proceed with my presentation. Can you see my slide? All right. So in this slide, you will see, so this is the first slide. So, all right, let me give you a fascinating geological history of Mindoro 50 million years ago, based on the study conducted by Robert Hall in 1995. In this slide, you will see the island of Mindoro and then the island of Palawan 50 million years ago. So Mindoro, along with Palawan and the Calamianes Island, was rifted from the Asian mainland approximately 32 million years ago. transported through seafloors spreading across the growing South China Sea, added to the growing Philippine archipelago approximately 17 million years ago, and uplifted above water approximately 5 to 10 million years ago. Mindoro is separated from Palawan to the south and Luzon to the north by deep water channels. Mindoro has not been connected to those islands in the past. At present, you can see that Mindoro is at the heart of the Philippine archipelago. In this slide, you will see the map of Madagascar, as what Bambina said a while ago, no? So, and you'll also see the map of Mindoro. For visualization purposes and not the exact scale, okay? So please take note of that. Mindoro is like the size of a standard basketball court, while Madagascar would be like, the size of SM MOA. However, Mindoro has more bird species than Madagascar. So tama yung sinabi ni Bambina kanina. And we are comparing this based on how huge their landmass area with that of the island of Mindoro. The same goes for the United Kingdom, with a land area 23 times larger than Mindoro. But Mindoro has 2.6 times more reptiles and amphibian species than the UK. The island is indeed a haven for scientists and biologists, nature enthusiasts, and tourists, as it offers a wide variety of choices from mountains, reefs, lakes, bays, and caves. Sabi nga ni Bambina, pati waterfall. So if Africa has savanna, Mindoro has Mount Iglit Bako Natural Park, and that's in Occidental Mindoro. For the mountaineers, Mount Kinabalu in Malaysia, Mindoro has to offer the majestic Mount Halcon. Of course, the very well-known Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Guess what? We have that in Upper Reef Natural Park, and that's in Occidental Mindoro. This is a Lake Tahoe in California, USA, and we have the Nauhan Lake National Park in Oriental Mindoro. This is a Bay of Islands in New Zealand. Look at that beauty. It's one of the most beautiful bays in the world, Puerto Galera, Oriental Mindoro. This one is the Mammoth Cave in the USA, while we have this beautiful cave in Abra de Ilog, Occidental Mindoro. So this clearly shows that Mindoro is richly endowed with terrestrial, wetland, and marine resources, much higher in species diversity and endemism on a per area basis than any other country in the world. These counts potentially increase each year due to continuous new studies or discoveries with more extensive biodiversity studies. But, threats are always, and there will be, it's rampant, okay? And unfortunately, the Philippines ranks second among countries as the most vulnerable to climate change. We all know that climate change is already a devastating effect on our ecosystems and biodiversity. And yes, this is very alarming. In this slide, you will see, particularly on the forest cover, 32% of the world's forest has been destroyed. In the Philippines, we have lost 13 million hectares from 1980 to 2010 of forest cover. And in Mindoro, the forestry net loss from 30% to 27% from 1988 to 2015. Guys, the message is very clear. We must act now, and despite the global pandemic, environmental degradation must be controlled. Our very own tamarau, as you can see on my slide, our very own tamarau and other species can only be found in Mindoro, nowhere else in the world. And they are critically endangered according to IUCN's Red List. So this is the Ilim bushy-tailed cloud rat, and this is the Mindoro bleeding heart. This is the reason for MBCFI's existence and continued efforts, because wildlife and its habitat cannot speak. So we must, and we will. MBCFI continues to provide science-based recommendations to policymakers on Mindoro biodiversity. And in my photo, you will see this is on top of the Mount Siglit Bako, one of the monitoring stations when we do the annual Tamaraw count. And we have been doing this regularly through the leadership of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the Tamaraw Conservation Program, and of course our partners in conservation. We also do mission work of organizing and capacitating partner communities to reduce pressure on natural resources and mitigate any threats to biodiversity. So far, we have planted more than 169,000 of native tree species and 163 hectares of reforestation and woodlot restoration areas in Mindoro. Also, we have helped organize and registered 14 people's organization of local and indigenous Manyans. And last but not the least, we promote greater awareness through our CARE program. From the recent scientific studies conducted by MBCFI, so far we have done 40 scientific researches, and we have recorded 54 new and significant species and one newly discovered species. So these significant records are major inputs in passing policies to protect these species and their habitat. For all the positive contributions and achievements of MBCFI, we have been accredited and recognized by international, national agencies, and award giving bodies. But we want to do more. And this afternoon, it is my privilege to present to you the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Center. It is a physical embodiment of sustainability, benefiting present and future generations which will rise in Puerto Galera. MBCC is the first of its kind in Mindoro, a one-story building with 600 square meter floor area, sitting on a 16-hectare property overlooking the bay. Mindoro is one of the major regions for biodiversity conservation. Researches have been done and will still be done in the region. Specimens collected from these researches can be displayed in the museum. The museum would also have archaeological and ethnographic collections to highlight Mindoro's indigenous peoples, culture, and art. MBCC aims to be a certified green building under the International Finance Corporation's EDGE certification. The MBCFI will also hold their office inside the MBCC. It will be the Center of Biodiversity Conservation and Education in Mindoro and will have a library, conference and training rooms, including an audio-visual room. Eco-lodge, where accommodation space could be provided for research groups, training participants, and other visitors. They could experience and immerse themselves with the Mangyan and Mindoro culture and avail of locally produced items at the Mangyan Heritage Hall. Nature Discovery Trail will provide a close encounter with Mindoro's biodiversity, as well as other possible activities at the view deck, bird watching, firefly tour and butterfly watching, and glamping. It will feature the native tree species of the Philippines, especially Mindoro. Hands-on activities will be made available to the visitors, such as bio-intensive gardening, native tree, and forest restoration. A temporary holding facility for endangered animals previously harmed or illegally traded will be provided. MBCC is aligned with the One Island approach in meeting the objectives of the local government towards sustainability, conservation of its natural resources, social progress, economic viability, and contributes to UN Sustainable Development Goal. So yeah, we've started to make the dream a reality. And to date, we have constructed 40% of buildings 1 and 2, as you can see on my slide. And we hope that together we will build this legacy and help us sustain our gains. You know, there's so many ways that you can help us. So, from um, the naming rights of the different components of the center, like the view deck, the museum, the amphitheater, the Manyan Heritage Hall. These are some of the opportunities that you may want to take in order to help us build this legacy. The greenhouse where native tree seedlings will be housed, a research lab, and I'd like to thank the DOST. So far, they have donated a solar panel for the research lab center. Thank you so much, DOST. And a natural trail, welcome area, biodiversity signages, um, the wildlife rescue area, eco lodge, and diorama. But you can also help us sustain our gains through helping our thematic programs like the nature-based solutions, food resiliency, scientific research, social enterprise and cultural preservation, environmental conservation, sustainable tourism, and enforcement. So these are just some of the many opportunities that you guys can help us. I'm flashing on the screen my contact number and details. And you can also use your QR scanner to scan this QR code to link to our webpage to get to know more about MBCFI's work and advocacies in the provinces of Oriental and Occidental Mindoro. So the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. Doing, doing all of this is the right thing to do. So let us not be the threat. Together, we act as one. Together, we can make a difference. Mindoro needs us. Thank you so much and magandang hapon po sa ating lahat.
Thank you so much, Grace, for that very interesting and informative presentation. I personally would like to share that I've always been really curious about the tamaraws, and they're very endearing creatures unique to our country alone. And I strongly believe and agree that we must do our part in conserving these species. I haven't actually seen one up close, and I'd like to have that opportunity soon. Moving on to our next segment, we have something from the Malampaya Foundation Incorporated. Can we cue the video of Malampaya, please? Thank you. We salute the various efforts of MFI to protect our marine biodiversity. We are truly blessed to be living in this country. Our next speaker, Executive Director of MFI, Ms. Karen Agabian, will talk about the Philippines as the world's epicenter of marine biodiversity, citing the facts that support this statement. And she'll also discuss the importance of marine protected areas and their shell species, restocking through the String of Pearls project. Ladies and gentlemen, I turn you over to Ms. Karen Agabin. Karen?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Bambina. Just want to check whether my screen is all right.
That's fine, Karen.
Okay. Thank you for that introduction. Now, I'd like to start my talk with a fact that you stated earlier in your introduction, that the Philippines is one of only 17 megadiversity countries on Earth. We share this prestige with 16 other countries, and all of these 17 countries, including ourselves, harbor 70% of the planet's terrestrial biodiversity, but we occupy only 10% of the Earth's surface. Now, to be considered a megadiverse country, a country has to have at least 5,000 endemic terrestrial flora and fauna at the species level and should have marine ecosystems within its borders. Now, the Philippines, as of 2017-2018, already has over 52,000 described species, and half of this are endemic. Out of the 52,000 are 10,000 marine biotas. So that's about 20% of the 52,000 described species. And likewise, as you heard earlier, as well, the Philippines is one of only 6 countries in the Coral Triangle. We share the stage with 5 other countries. So whole or parts of these countries are within the scientific map of the Coral Triangle. So parts of Malaysia, parts of Indonesia, parts of Papua New Guinea, and we have Solomon Islands and Timor-Leste. If you look at the Philippines, all of our land masses are within the scientific map of the Coral Triangle, considered the Amazon of the sea. And I'm sure many people have heard about the Philippines having been declared the center of marine biodiversity in the world. So the center of the Coral Triangle. And this started when Dr. Carpenter and Springer published their study in 2005, wherein they overlaid nearly 3,000 species distribution maps covering the Indo-Pacific region. And all of these data and maps that they utilized were already existing data and maps produced by taxonomic experts in the field of marine science. The species covered were vertebrates, invertebrates, and varied forms of habitats. And the result, as you can see on the map, resulted in the central Philippines being the peak of concentrated biodiversity. You will see here the bullseye came into focus with all of the maps combined, Western Central Pacific. And even when they narrowed down the maps to just fish, the results came out to be similar. They also narrowed down the maps to just coral reefs, and the same results were obtained. And they even tried different cuts of distribution types, let's say in the West Pacific maps only or Central Pacific map only, and the results came out to be the same. Now, this finding of Carpenter and Springer in 2005 sort of upset some scientists in the field and launched their own study. An ichthyologist by the name of Gerald Allen in 2008 published his own study. This time he overlaid nearly 4,000 Indo-Pacific distribution maps, focusing on reef fishes only. And one of his objectives was to disprove the 2005 finding of Carpenter and Springer, but he ended up affirming the results in 2005. As you can see here, Central Philippines came out with the most number of species concentration as far as reef fishes are concerned. Now, the latest study of a similar kind was published in 2013, likewise focusing on Indo-Pacific. And this time, Dr. Sanshanko used more than 10,000 distribution maps covering all vertebrates, all invertebrates, and all habitat types. So mangroves, seagrass, and corals. And he concluded the same. So Central Philippines for all species, and narrowing down to specific taxa, fish and invertebrates. And habitat forming species, we share the richness with Indonesia. And the past 2, 3 decades, expeditionists continued to discover new species within Philippine waters, particularly within the Verde Island Passage, but there are also some discoveries in the southern Philippines near Davao. As you can see, 2020, last year, they discovered some. Likewise, 2019, 2015, and there are many others. Now, this picture shows or demonstrates the high species occurrence in the Philippines and the Indonesian region. And it shows here that the farther you go from the center or the heart of the coral triangle, the Philippines and Indonesia, the numbers decline in terms of species richness. So if you look at the Philippines, 2,500, for example, this is an old map. It's now 3,300. And the farther you go, the lower the numbers. So yes, there's a good, and as you saw in the previous presentation, Philippine biodiversity facts, we have the numbers. Certainly, we have the endemicity, and so we have the biodiversity. However, there's also the bad, and these are facts. Over 50 years, we saw a 90% decline in our fish catch rates. So catch per unit effort declined by this much. And in 2002, a study by Dr. Alino concluded that only 5% of our corals are in excellent condition, and that's way back in 2002. And some scientists now estimate that there's only 2 to 3% of excellent corals in the Philippines. Over a period of 100 years, we lost 94% of our forest cover, reiterating some facts of the previous presentation. And now add to that the geopolitical conflicts that we face at the West Philippine Sea. So our countrymen are now, our fisher folks are having a hard time accessing the rich fishing grounds of the West Philippine Sea. So among the solutions, very effective solution that we have been involved in, and so are other organizations, is really to start taking care of our internal waters. We have to start tripling the management, proper management of our internal waters. After all, the Central Philippines has been shown to have the highest marine species occurrence. So as I was saying, marine protected areas are very effective solutions to marine biodiversity degradation. But that is a big if these are effectively managed. They can accelerate the restoration and sustainable use of the resources and help regenerate and rebound fisheries of the country. So as you can see here, our marine ecosystems are among the most productive in the world. Its value and the services, ecosystem services that we benefit from cannot be matched by engineering or technological solutions. And among the benefits are very obvious, food, materials, medicine, tourism benefits, even oxygen. More than 50% of our oxygen comes from the ocean. And likewise, shoreline protection being provided by mangroves and corals. And likewise, marine protected areas emphasize the importance of conservation through the involvement of the people, the community. We've seen for ourselves that the best environmental stewards are the nearest human dwellers. So people who live in the forest or near the forest or near the coastlines are the best stewards. They get involved through decision-making process, planning, and the like direct conservation actions. So at Malampaya Foundation, the past 7, 8 years, this has been one of our major focus. One of our major investments is in working with coastal communities, local governments, and national agencies to establish or expand marine protected areas and help set up effective management mechanisms. As you can see, our focus areas are the highlighted areas in the map in yellow, and we have sample technical maps on the left of marine protected areas that we set up with local governments and communities. Now, our conservation strategy employs a four-prong approach, and a large part of our interventions are actually social in nature because the nature of the threats are likewise social, socio-political, socio-economic, socio-cultural. Hence, we do a lot of work in social mobilization and advocacy work at the local level, policy formation, strengthening enforcement, and capacity building. We likewise have been helping coastal communities in socio-economic improvement projects like income diversification endeavors, social enterprise development, capacitating people for employment or self-employment. And then we're also rooted in science, hence we do regular ecological assessments. We have permanent monitoring stations in all of our 35 sites in 31 communities. And we do regular habitat surveys and assessments, and we share all the data with our partners. And we do quite a number of work in rehabilitation. As you saw in the video earlier, we restock reefs with shell species that are endangered and locally extinct. Under ecological rehabilitation is likewise where we do a lot of work on the ground to establish new or expand marine protected areas and help set up effective management mechanisms. And community-based reforestation and waste management. So you would see the contrast here between poorly managed reefs and effectively managed marine protected areas. As early as 3 to 4 years, fisheries may rebound if a particular area is protected, as opposed to the images you see on the left, where there's no effective or no active management in place. And we've seen this across our 30 plus sites. And we've compared those that do manage them well and do not manage them. So to recap, our results after even as early as 5 years, we've seen increasing fish abundance. And this is really one of our major objectives of the program is increasing fish abundance. And then a pleasant surprise is seeing returning endangered species. An example is the Napoleon wrasse, which has not been seen for 5, 6 years. And now coastal communities are reporting sightings, and even during our own reef monitoring. And likewise, the blacktip sharks, so top predators, are returning in some of the reef areas that we protect. And likewise, dolphins. And of course, people are better capacitated to manage their own natural resources that are found within their communities or around their communities. And then more resilient local ecosystems. A well-protected reef area is more resilient than those that are not protected, so they recover much faster from events like typhoons and coral bleaching events. Now, I'd like to spend just a few minutes on the String of Pearls project, the video, the subject of the video you saw earlier. We partnered with Western Philippines University in 2012 to produce and to culture the abalone and top shell initially for restocking in the reefs that we are helping protect. And then later on, the giant clam, 3 giant clam species were added in 2018. 2017 was when the presence of Tridacna jagas, a Philippines true native species. There were 5 breeders that were confirmed in the waters of Honda Bay of Puerto Princesa. So why these shells, or why these invertebrates? They play an important role in our ecosystem. They have a symbiotic relationship with other marine animals, providing their important source of food, not just for humans, but also for, for fishes and for fishes and jellyfish, and up the food chain. They provide the materials for reef building. Calcium carbonate comes from clams, among others. So if you take out any of the species from its natural habitat, it results to ecosystem imbalances. For example, the disappearance of the triton shell and very low populations of reef fishes from reefs have resulted in massive crown of thorns outbreak, not just in the Philippines, but also in other countries. And as we all know, one crown of thorn can destroy up to 2 square meter of coral real estate per day. So can you just imagine if there's an outbreak of 10,000 of crown of thorns in a particular area for a month, then that's enough to kill off majority, if not all, of the corals in that particular area. So these are just a few photos of the process of spawning, culturing the shells. The Tridacna gigas, because of its low numbers, have to be spawned in situ or on location. And then the collected gametes you saw earlier on the video are brought to the hatchery for growth. And when they reach a certain size, then they're restocked in the marine protected areas. And they're left in cages for a couple more months to grow into about 5-6 inches. They can be released in the wild. So we're looking at, and the partners together with ourselves are hoping to bring this out of extinction. And the estimate is that would take 15 to 20 years. And again, that's with the big if the reefs have continued protection and management within the same time frame. So that concludes my talk this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thanks for that talk. That was another enlightening and discerning presentation that really inspires us to move, get up, and do something to help protect our marine protected areas, as well as our abundant marine life here in the Philippines. On this note, I would like to formally open this webinar's virtual question and answer, as well as a panel discussion. I'd like to call back Executive Director of MBCFI, Ms. Grace Giamante, and MFI Executive Director, Ms. Karen Agabin, for the panel discussion. I would also like to introduce 2 important additional panelists, Dr. Lota Creencia, PhD from the College of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences of the Western Philippines University in Palawan, and MFI Marine Biologist and Conservation Manager, Pacifico Beldia II. Do we have all the panelists here now? Would you like to spotlight everyone and put it on gallery view? I think, Lee. While we're arranging that, I just wanted to ask, just to start, before start of the Q&As, can you tell me, any of you, what the difference is between native and endemic? Because you say species is native to the Philippines or a species is endemic to the Philippines. Is there a difference between the two? Anyone?
Hi.
Hi, Grace.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Bambina.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a species that lives in an area naturally. Endemic naman, parang tama raw, it's endemic in Mindoro. It can only be found in Mindoro, nowhere else in the world. So yeah. Does
Okay.
that
I was just trying to find out what the distinction was when you said a species was endemic versus a species was native. Okay,
so yeah.
thanks for that. Okay, let's just go to the questions. This is addressed to all the panelists. What do you think is the best way to encourage the youth and adults alike to develop their interest in our beautiful and unique biodiversity? What can inspire them to act and move towards its protection? And corollary to that, what has been your greatest challenge as NGOs helping to protect our country's biodiversity?
All right.
A long question.
Bambina?
Yes.
All right. Your first question was about the youth, no?
Yes, how to encourage them to be interested in our biodiversity and protect. Because once you're interested, once you gain their interest, then
Right. I think for me, no, the best way is really to inform them and to educate them. And aside from that, you need to get them on board because they need to experience it. They need they need to see what's in it for them to be able to exert effort. Not just because we're all exerting, no, our efforts now, but it's not just for us, not just for present generations, but it is for them. And if they see that we are doing this for them and we enjoin them to all of these efforts, conservation efforts. You know, ang mga kabataan ngayon, Bambina, they're very much open, no? To going to, forests, to the mountains. Lahat yan, pupuntahan ng mga kabataan ngayon. I think that's the first thing to do, you know. You need to be involved. You need to be informed and to be involved. And from there, may action ka na expect. So I think that's the simple answer from my end.
but I think that when you say that, there's like a real, I think with during the pandemic being on lockdown and all that, I think we've developed a real interest in being outdoors as well, right? After all these months of confinement. And it's great to be able to go like to the forest, the parks and everything.
And
But
me, Bambina, no, in addition to that, given the pandemic, you will see a lot of youth influencers online, you know, talking about biodiversity, talking about helping people, talking about last year, no, kasagsagan ng pandemic, through the leadership and sa pangunguna ng UNDP and the DENR itong Together for Tamaraws. Would you believe mga bata ang mga nag-umpisa na to, nitong call na to help the Tamaraw Rangers. So I think they just need to know to be involved.
it's great. Then Karen, how do you translate that? I mean, like it's very easy to get to, let's say, I mean, not very easy, but I'm just saying it's on land is one thing. How do you discover, like for the youth and even adults who are interested, how do you discover the marine life underneath? Because, and so that you would be interested in helping to protect it.
You know, actually, as part of our program, we invest in the youth a lot, and we conduct a lot of youth camps, information campaigns. We expose them to the sea, they go snorkeling, and then, give them basic ecology, basic conservation concepts. We usually do that over the course of 3 to 4 days. So they all gather in one place. And we normally do that close to the ecosystems. They would actually see mangroves and seagrass and corals. So it's not just a classroom event, no. And it's paying off because we've seen some of these youths that were involved in the youth camps now more involved in MPA management. So some of them have become members of the MPA management councils in the communities and are helping in the conservation actions, in the decision-making process. So it really pays off. Our conservation manager can share more about the involvement of the youth on the ground. Noy?
Yes, good afternoon to all the attendees. School-based information campaigns and youth camps work wonders for youth leaders and emerging champions. We've seen participants who continue to champion conservation efforts in their own little ways. One of our key messages during the IEC session is corals are animals or ang corals ay hayop. In the early years, none of the students and even fisherfolk participants know that corals are animals. Most of them thought that corals are mere stones. As we continue to do our IEC campaigns, school-based IEC work and youth camps, most of our new participants already know that corals are animals. So simple messaging for kids work and will help sustain their appreciation of our key ecosystems.
Well, related to this is for everyone. We have a question from one of our attendees. I have no college degree yet or anything, and I'm still a student. Please tell me how I could be involved as a youth helping in your organization fulfill its goals to help Philippine biodiversity. Is there a particular program that they should be addressing themselves to? Like, is there a program director they can get in touch with, maybe? Or a website?
Bambina, let me answer that. Thank you for your question. For if you want to help, please feel free to contact. The secretariat will be flashing our contact details in a while. So I cannot answer straight away kung ano yung kaya mong gawin, but maybe from small things like volunteering in our activities, or maybe as being a community scientist or part of the monitoring team. There's so many ways that you can help us. But please contact us if you're really serious of getting involved. Please contact me directly. I reply to most of the messages online and via text. So please contact us. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. I want to ask all of you now, how were you affected by the pandemic, your conservation efforts during, the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, I should say? In terms of maybe fundraising was probably affected, and maybe getting manpower out there to, to the areas, to protect the areas. What were the biggest challenges?
Okay. Bambina, if I may answer that question.
Yes, of course.
Alright. Alam mo, hindi naman tayo nag-adjust during the pandemic. But last year, it was it was indeed a very challenging for everyone. And a huge percentage of our work, involves field surveys, community engagements, biodiversity monitoring. Those things that I have mentioned have been affected due to COVID-19 related travel restrictions. And of course, we prioritize naman din ang safety and security of our staff. So very limited din yung ating galaw sa area. And most of us until now work from home, no? Kasi mahirap, no? Hindi natin masasabi, but some of those na mga staff namin that talagang hindi maiiwasan na nasa area, we ask them to be extra careful. And we also respected yung mga local ordinances and even yung mga IPs, yung mga mangyan sa bundok. Hindi rin nila tayo pinayagan na pumasok sa loob to do community engagement or any other activities, kahit yung mga research, no? So we respected that. And again, you mentioned about the budget. consequently, our budget has been reallocated and adjusted. So everyone in the organization, from management to staff, from all of our programs, we all have adjusted, due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Babina, it's likewise the same for us at Malampaya Foundation. So travel was restricted, our movements were restricted and very difficult. We had to comply with many requirements, and even our hatchery was affected. We were supposed to do quite a number of spawnings. Dr. Lota Creencia can probably elaborate more on this. Dr. Lota?
In our house, we accept visitors usually to show to them how the baby clams look like, so that they would appreciate more about the life history of these shells that we are taking care of. So yeah, in our field stocking, we have restrictions. We are supposed, for example, to go to Coron, but there we have just need to, we meet our counterparts just in another island because there are restrictions. And we are supposed to do more. Yeah, as Karen tell us, we are supposed to do more spawning, more hatchery work. And in terms of education, we are much affected because we like to tell our students, to tell the people that these are the wonderful shells, these are the amazing shells that we want to return, or to help our reefs to recover. Yeah, it's something that we have to adjust for now. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lota. I think let me just follow that up. I have a question here from one of our media editors and reporters who are joining us. We have quite a number. We have quite a big media contingent today. So thank you for joining us also, members of the media. This is a question from Bruce Rodriguez. While preserving the biodiversity of Mindoro and the whole archipelago is clearly important, what economic benefits can the country reap from preserving the marine ecosystem?
There are many. We cannot give value exactly, but just what mentioned in the presentations. As a whole, the biodiversity is important, especially for us, for our well-being. The oxygen we get from the forest, from the plants in the seas, and then the happiness we get from looking at the biodiversity. Plus what Karen told us about the balance, because when there's imbalance, all of us will be affected. And of course, the values given before, all ecosystems have big values. It's not the actual per piece, but the totality of it is very important to all of us. Just something related to, for example, the greenhouse effect. The mangroves and the seagrasses are the largest has the largest capacity to sequester carbon that to alleviate the greenhouse effect or the climate change. So there are many things. I cannot give the exact value for them, but all of them are very valuable.
Thank you. Is marine ecotourism a thing, Karen or Dr. Lotta? Or is that a thing that you can, I mean, you have people going to see the butandings, right? But that's above ground. Is there such a thing as marine ecotourism? Or would that be more harmful for the species underwater?
Especially now in Palawan, we really feel the effect of the tourism because of the pandemic. But many tourist visitors in Palawan are usually also looking at the marine, marine beautiful marine environment of Palawan. So yeah, it's important. So maybe you can add.
Are there any maybe restrictions to that, so that you can make sure that the marine environment is protected?
Yeah, I think I can tell us more
Nice.
about that.
During the pandemic, we can keep both ways. Uh, there's a disadvantage, when it comes to uh, the impact of pandemic in our tourism industry. Uh, if we talk purely about environmental conservation, when during the pandemic, marine protected areas and fisheries management zones are threatened by fishing, we can also say that it did provide uh, some sort of an advantage if the if we talk about proving or affirming that biodiversity indeed will help us meet our simple daily needs in terms of providing food and other ecosystem services when we are all at home waiting for, say, a message from our friends who are equally jailed in their own homes. Uh, but in tourism destinations, especially in Puerto Galera and in some of our focal sites in Palawan, it suffered more compared to other sites, and fishing served as an alternative livelihood uh, for displaced workers in the tourism sector. So we've seen this shift in livelihood, and it threatened marine protected areas and fisheries management zones during the pandemic. On the other hand, however, it can be said that diverse marine environment continued to provide sustenance during these difficult times as well.
Thank you, Noy. Um, Dr. Lotta, she mentioned a little bit about the greenhouse effect, but I wanted to ask all of you, global warming and climate change are two important discussions that we can no longer shy away from today. And at this very crucial point in human history, just how important is biodiversity, and what role does it play in mitigating climate change and creating a better planet for future generations to come? Noy, do you want to take that? No,
Should I go first?
no.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. Uh, the diversity of genes, species, and ecosystems provide balance to everything. Each species is programmed to survive with its relatives in specific habitats, or as we humans call homes or houses. And they also are programmed to coexist with other species. So biodiversity is key to fully functional ecosystems that provide support systems like supply of oxygen, clean air, clean water, provision of other ecosystem services, and even pollination of plants that assures productive agriculture. That's food to all of us humans. Extreme climate conditions will allow certain species to prosper, and without the coping mechanisms of a healthy environment, an imbalance occurs. A simple example is the proliferation of crown ferns or quots in Ma'am Karen's presentation. Uh, Quots is a species of starfish that feed on corals at about 1 square meter per day. So it can damage a square meter of corals per day. The absence of other species of fish will allow, and invertebrates, uh, will allow crown of ferns to proliferate and totally damage your reefs, resulting to loss of habitat that serves as breeding, nursery, and feeding grounds to thousands upon thousands of fish species. We can't allow this to happen. At the end of the day, our simple actions to prevent speeding up global warming will always matter. So, for all those who are interested in extending health, uh, however little it may be, by simply putting your garbage just the right bin, uh, it will always help, and it will matter at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Karen, have you found any like the amount of plastic in the oceans? Has that increased or decreased? Probably decreased during the pandemic, but on the whole, there. I mean, we see a lot of photos of dolphins caught in plastic or even turtles, and it's like really heartbreaking, right? What are you seeing now? What levels are you seeing now in our?
Yes, yes, unfortunately, we do see a lot of plastics, especially when we do reef monitoring, when we do underwater cleanups. I've had to pull diapers and, similar types of garbage from corals and mangroves. Unfortunately, yes. And one of the things we're promoting in communities is reducing their waste and managing their wastes properly. It will not happen overnight. Equally, there has to be policies at the local level and implementation. In some places, the policies are in place but are not enforced. Unfortunately, that's the problem. So we work with the grassroots and do all of the implement all of the educational tools that we have as far as waste management is concerned and its impact on the marine ecosystem.
Yes, I,
Yes, Doctor.
I,
You're coming in a bit choppy, Dr. Lotta.
Okay, okay. So to add that we are also doing research to let people know that the plastics they are in the ground. In the, for example, in Puerto Princesa, we have very beautiful beaches, but we have found out that there are many areas here that are extremely dirty because of the plastic pollution. So through the research, we inform them that we need to work uh, and make our beaches cleaner and our marine environment in general.
I may.
Yes, I was going to ask you, Grace, actually, if you're finding the same levels of pollution above ground.
Ayan. So anyway, yun nga, no, you mentioned a while ago about how important biodiversity is in mitigating climate change. And I think I'd like to give mga simple solutions to this problem. And I think everyone that listens here can do your share in mitigating climate change. So alam mo, so yun, nabanggit kanina nila yung sa marine conservation efforts. But in the terrestrial, you just need to plant native trees, and as much as possible, um, stop, introducing alien invasive species. And if kung pwede nga lang i-eradicate na yung mga ibang lugar na kasi hindi nagbabalanse yung ecosystem if we have those invasive species, no?
Could you
And
could you name one, maybe one particularly prominent invasive species?
magandang tanong yan, Bambina, no? And actually, this is very controversial um, noong pandemic because um, nag dahil sa kagustuhan ng maraming nagugutom and kailangan may pagkain sa harap ng lamesa ng ating bawat pamilya. Mm-hmm. And syempre andyan yung mga proyekto ng ating pamahalaan that to introduce or to maglaglag ng tilapia fingerlings, no? And in some water, body of waters, hindi ito pwede. Katulad sa Mindoro, no? There's Nauhan Lake National Park. Kanina pinakita ko yun sa inyo sa slide ko. And ang plano doon is sana magbabak ng tilapia fingerlings sa Nauhan Lake para daw maraming mahuli ang mga tao para may pagkain sila sa lamesa. But the thing is, itong tilapia ay hindi naman ito native at hindi rin siya endemic. Ito yung tanong mo kanina, Bambina. No? So, hindi siya nararapat na nandun sa Nauhan Lake kasi invasive siya. Yung bang pwede niyang masapawan, no? Layman's term, masapawan yung mga existing species sa loob ng Nauhan Lake. So definitely, there are other ways naman na we can provide food. Bakit naman kailangan pa sa Nauhan Lake? Pwede naman sa man-made water para doon maglaglag ng fingerlings. Still, we are addressing the social issues na magkaroon ng pagkain ng community. So, yan yung mga simpleng efforts that we do, to protect our biodiversity. And siguro sa ating mga bahay, sa mga nakikinig sa ating tahanan ngayon, no? Daming practical tips to help mitigate itong climate change. You know, simpleng pagpapalit ng bulb mo to LED. Huwag kang mahiya, no? Kung may mga hand-me-downs, I love ukay. So, hindi ako nahihiya na manghingi ng hand-me-downs, or ako naman, ibigay ko yung mga damit ng pinagliitan ng mga anak ko sa ibang tao. Mga small stuff like that, that would help a lot. Repurpose your furniture, your clothes. You can repurpose your clothes kung wala na sa fashion, o ulitin. O di kaya, mataba ako ngayon, hindi ko muna itatapon yun. Papayat ako, hindi ko rin itatapon yun kasi ako kasi personally, yo-yo yung weight ko. So, alam mo yun, kesa itapon mo, pamigay mo, or, well, pamigay, okay, may makikinabang pa. And even sa dining table natin, very simple. Di ba dun sa mga community pantry natin, kumuha ng naaayon. Ako, sa bahay, finish your food on whatever on your plate. Yun, sinasabi ko, kumuha kayo ng naaayon sa gutom nyo. So, alam mo, mga simple tips like that helps a lot. So, I don't want
Small steps that we all can take.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, oo.
That's really interesting now. I mean, you all spoke about the importance of educating people about what's going on, and to have, I mean, if you don't know what's happening, then you can't help, right? So awareness is very important. I have an excellent question here from I think a senior high school teacher. Jonah Rodis is a senior high school science teacher from DepEd, and she's very interested in developing a contextualized learning package that spreads awareness for the youth, specifically public school students. Is there any way that we can collaborate so that we can integrate more relatable knowledge from your researches?
All right. Can I answer that question, Bambina?
Sure, you can all answer it.
Thank you, Madam, for your question. In fact, sa MBCFI, we have this strengthening environmental education for development. So this is a specific training for public school teachers in Mindoro. And we have been training them on biodiversity conservation and how to incorporate yung biodiversity conservation in their daily lesson plans. In fact, in partnership with the Department of Education, we were able to come up with an environmental source book. No? This is a source book containing a lot of lesson plans that's applicable to K to 12 curriculum, and it covers different subjects from science to math to English to Filipino, and itong librong ito, this is an environmental source book. This simply helps the teacher, communicate yung Mindoro's biodiversity treasures. Like, for example, sa math teacher, nandun sa syllabus, okay, dati nakikita natin, no? 1 apple plus 1 apple, or 1 lion plus 1 lion is equal to 2 lion. Dito sa book na ito, we promoted the local species, no? So 1 tamaraw plus 1 tamaraw. So may ganyan tayong effort. And this can easily be replicated in other parts of the country. And in fact, CIRCA has supported us by co-publishing this book. And hopefully, the Department of Education can hear us and support the replication of such material, because this can be replicated in other parts of the country.
Karen Onoy, do you want to add to that from your end?
Yes, we can share some materials we likewise developed for school teachers. We've published them, in fact, with the DepEd in Batangas. And we can check availability and stock of those materials, so we can provide copies to those who are interested.
Before we end this anyway, I think the contact details will be flashed on the screen. So if you want to take note of those, then you'll know how to get in touch. For viewers, you'll know how to get in touch with MBCFI and Malampaya as well. I think we're coming to the end of today's session. Karen and Grace, may I ask you, Maybe for your final messages to our audience about your conservation efforts and the need to protect what we have in this
Sure.
country. Neighbors.
Yeah, everyone has a part to play. We all depend on biodiversity. The prosperity of humans, that's us, is dependent on biodiversity. And investing in conservation is investing in our future. So that's my final message to all.
Grace?
Right. Okay, with all the, what with what we've heard, and that's what I've promised a while ago, no? Now you will learn a lot of things in this afternoon session. There's a lot of information right in front of you, and we hope that we all do the right thing to do. Again, inuulit ko, let us not be the threat, and together we act as one, no? And sinasabi ko rin sa atin, and I keep repeating, no? For me, for MBCFI, marami pa tayong pwedeng gawin, marami pa tayong pwedeng pagtulungan sa Mindoro and in other parts of the country. And siguro yung concern is there. You just need to tap, and you just need to learn more about things in your surroundings, no? And siguro I'd like to take this opportunity because MBCFI is seeking support financially and in kind for all our programs, no? The thematic, and again, yung aming Mindoro Biodiversity, actually this is not amin, this is for us. It's a Biodiversity Conservation Center. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask help and assistance from you guys. If you have, if you want to help us, we have the naming rights opportunities, and we have thematic programs. Kung hindi man kayo, baka may kakilala kayo that you may want to refer us. And kung hindi talaga kaya, kung after referral, please pray for us. Please pray for everyone who's doing a lot of good things for the environment and for our future. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. And before I end, Bambina, let me take this opportunity. MBCFI also launched the Colors of Biodiversity. It's an artwork of homegrown artists from Mindoro. It's a 1 month online virtual exhibit of their paintings, artworks, homegrown artists from Mindoro. So this is an online activity. Please visit their Facebook page, Colors of Biodiversity, and Instagram account, Colors of Biodiversity. Magandang hapon, and thank you, Manila House. Thank you, Bambina, and thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for accommodating most, if not all, of our questions today. Thank you for your very thoughtful answers backed by your years of experience in your respective industries. You're all experts in your fields, and all of us here felt your passion and dedication to your specific environmental advocacies. I'm inspired by your relentless zest and commitment to protect our biodiversity, and I'm sure all our viewers here today will emerge more knowledgeable and empathetic about the state of our country's biodiversity after this webinar. I wouldn't be surprised if this event has given us a deeper appreciation of our country's biodiversity and the role we can play in protecting and nurturing it. For those of you who are eager to take part in this movement for the environment, as well as for those interested to support the two foundations, MBCFI and MFI, please don't hesitate to contact them directly on their official websites. It will be flashed on the screen right now. And as Grace had mentioned, in celebration of International Day of Biological Diversity, homegrown visual artists from Oriental and Occidental Mindoro launched an online art exhibit called Colors of Biodiversity, which aims to raise awareness about the rich yet threatened biodiversity in the country through the works of Mindoro local artists who support its conservation. All the works are for sale, and some of the proceeds will support the development of the Biodiversity Museum at the MBCFI's Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Center in Puerto Galera, Mindoro. So check out their Facebook page, as Grace had mentioned, at facebook.com, Colors of Biodiversity. We will also be sending a webinar evaluation survey through email, and then we hope you can all answer and send back to us. And if you have additional questions, please send back via return email. And so as both Karen and Grace have said, any form of help is most welcome and would be most appreciated. So with that, I conclude today's very educational and insightful webinar and the panel discussion for the preservation of our country's unique biodiversity, especially our endemic tamaraws from the Mindoro Island and our numerous marine protected areas. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part in this eye-opening event. May we all continue to live and behave with greater appreciation of our country's ecosystem and raise awareness of our country's treasures above and below water. We are truly blessed to call the Philippines our country, but also more importantly, our home. Just a reminder that this will be up, this video of today's webinar will be up at the Manila House YouTube channel. And obviously we're also streaming live today. And again, any questions, please direct it to the email addresses indicated here, and we'll forward them to our speakers today. And so thank you very much. Please celebrate together with us the wonders of our unique Philippine biodiversity by supporting both the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Foundation Incorporated and Malampaya Foundation Incorporated. Again, this has been a wonderful afternoon, very educational, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Olivares, your moderator and host, saying thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Bambina. Thank you, Karen, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all our attendees.